Thank you very much, Estelle Ferrugia, our speech and language therapist. I really loved that talk about how we can use the kind of everyday routines at home to help kids with their speech and language goals. I love the idea of a little helper, because I think as well as helping them with speech and language, they also get a sense of kind of purpose and they're connected with you doing things together. So yeah, thank you very much, Estelle, for those really lovely ideas. So my name is Rebekah Chadwick, and I'm a clinical psychologist. I thought you can probably tell from my voice that I'm British. I've been in Malta for about a year and a quarter now. I thought it might be helpful to share a bit about what a clinical psychologist is. So a clinical psychologist is someone who uses psychological theory, knowledge, and techniques to promote positive well-being and reduce psychological distress, and to help people make changes in their lives or to cope with challenges and difficulties. And we do this through talking therapy, through behavioural intervention, and through psychoeducation. So I'm here today to talk a bit about self-soothing in this time of crisis. And the way that I'm going to do that is by introducing you to a particular therapeutic approach that I sometimes use in my practice, and it's something called compassion-focused therapy. I'm going to share some practical ideas about how we can practice self-soothing, and I'm going to share some specific exercises that come from the psychological approach that I'm introducing. So the approach, as I said, is called compassion-focused therapy, and this really came to my mind when I was thinking about this crisis that we're all experiencing. It was founded by somebody called Paul Gilbert, and he's written this really lovely book, The Compassionate Mind, and it's a really nice book, and it's very easy to read, and it's designed to help us to understand the approach. And then the second half is full of different exercises that we can use to support us to kind of develop greater compassion for ourselves and for others in order to kind of get a good sense of well-being. And so I'm going to be sharing some ideas that come specifically from this book. Firstly, what do we mean by compassion? So when we're thinking about compassion, we're thinking about empathy and being sensitive to suffering, but also with a desire to alleviate that suffering. So it's empathy, but with a call to action when we're thinking about compassion. And in this particular therapeutic approach, compassion-focused therapy, it uses evolutionary psychology and what we know about our emotions to talk about how we all have three emotional regulation systems. And I've just got a little diagram here to kind of explain this a bit more. So we all have a threat system, and we all have a drive system, and we all have a soothing system, and these are all connected. And we're going to explain a little bit more about what each of these are. So the first one, the threat system, the one that I showed in red, this one, as you can imagine, is really about dealing with threats and danger. And it's important to remember that our brains evolved for survival. So they evolved to really be on the lookout for potential threats and dangers and to do its best to protect us all of the time. So our threat system takes this kind of better safe than sorry approach with the view that it would be better to respond, 9 times to respond 9 times when there's not really anything wrong, so that we also respond the 10th time when there's some real potential danger, because the risk of not responding is just too great. And when we're thinking about threats, I guess we're not just thinking about threats to ourselves directly, but also to threats to people that we love and people that we care for. And these might be things like not having enough food, not having shelter, threat of danger of injury, someone brandishing a knife or something like that. But they can also be things like the threat of rejection. Because we are social beings, it's really important for us to be part of the social group. And so there is a great sense of threat associated with rejection or feeling left out. And so it might also be kind of threats from things like criticism. And when we're thinking about this threat system, we're thinking about our stress hormones of adrenaline and cortisol. And we're thinking about the fight and flight system that you might have heard of. So when we experience some kind of danger, we can have the energy to fight or the energy to run away. And so this system can be really activating, but it can also be really inhibiting, in that sometimes when there's a danger, we might just go into a freeze mode where we just don't know what to do. We're kind of frozen in shock. And so this system can also be inhibiting. And the emotions that we're thinking about here when we're thinking about the threat system are obviously kind of anxiety and fear, but also the emotions of disgust and of anger. And then secondly, we have the drive system. Now, our drive system is really about seeking out the resources that we need. It's having the motivation and the energy to go and get the things that we need to survive and to prosper. And so these might be things like food or friendship and connection. And when it's in balance, this system is really helpful to us to help us work towards our life goals, to achieve the things that we want to achieve. And obviously, again, this comes from our evolutionary history, where it was really important for us to go out and get the resources that we needed. And then thirdly, we have this soothing system. Now, this system is associated with feeling content, feeling peace, feeling safe. And it's linked with giving and receiving affection. And one of the hormones we're interested in here is oxytocin, which is released when a mother gives birth. And what we know is that connection and affection from others helps to soothe us. So if we think about a baby crying, for example, when the baby is crying because there is some sort of threat, not only does dealing with that threat help to soothe the baby, changing the nappy or feeding them, but also just holding them and cuddling them really helps to soothe them as well. So these three systems are all connected. When there is a high threat, we might experience a high drive as well. So for example, if we don't have any food, we might have a great motivation to go out and seek food. If we are feeling threatened, then bringing the soothing system online kind of helps us to feel soothed, like the example with the baby. So the systems are all connected, and the ideal is really that they're kind of in balance, which is kind of represented here by the circles being more or less the same size. In reality, they can often become a little bit out of balance. And usually we experience the most difficulty when our threat system's out of balance. For example, we're experiencing high levels of anxiety, or our drive system might become out of balance as well. And that might be where we see things like over-competitiveness or perfectionism or experiencing burnout. If it's kind of out of balance in a different way, then we might be procrastinating instead of really working towards the things that we're actually driven towards. And like I said, our brain is most interested in survival. So it's really first and foremost interested in threats. So this threat system works first, really. And then when the threats are dealt with, our drive system goes out and gets what we need. And then our soothing system is really the kind of bottom of the pile. And for humans particularly, our soothing system often becomes, not very visible or not very present. Whereas if we think about, our pets, for example, if you've got a cat or a dog, you'll probably notice that they'll be alert when there's a potential threat around. They'll be driven to kind of let you know when they need feeding and that kind of thing. But they'll also spend time just sleeping or laying in the sun and just lazing, or allowing you to just stroke them and to have that kind of soothing system active as well. And I thought that this particular approach is really helpful for thinking about this current crisis, because obviously what we're experiencing with this global pandemic is that our sense of threat is really enlarged. It's enlarged for all of us. It's enlarged for all of us globally. And we're not just thinking about the threat of actually contracting the virus, but we have the threats associated with being separated from people that we care about, the threat of financial insecurity, and the threat of uncertainty, because we have these measures in place and we're not really sure when they're going to be lifted. And so this threat system is really big at the moment. Obviously, as well, there's the threat of, losing loved ones, or of us getting sick ourselves. So understandably, this threat system is really enlarged at the moment. And then our drive system might be a bit enlarged at the moment for some of us. And we've seen that a bit with this pandemic, in that in some places, there were reports of panic buying. So, where the threat was high of, maybe there won't be enough supplies, maybe we won't be allowed to go out to the shops, people were driven to go out and to get the things that they need. And then obviously if the threat's really big and the drive system's taking up space, our time and our energy and our brain is already involved with these two, there's very little space left over for this soothing system. And so these are really kind of out of balance at the moment. So I guess one of the kind of overall messages that I wanted to get across with using this particular approach to think about this current crisis is that our threat level is high. It's heightened. And so it's really normal for us to be anxious at the moment. And our usual ways that we might soothe, so we know that connection is really important for soothing. Our usual ways of connecting to people are disrupted. We can't hug people as easily. We can't even see some of the people that we love. And so our usual soothing is decreased whilst the threat is increased. And I guess one of the things I wanted to get across is about the importance of kind of treating ourselves and others with kindness and compassion. One way that we can try to kind of rebalance the systems is to use exercise, because that activates both the drive system and the soothing system. The drive system is rewarded when we achieve something. And so if we succeed at something like exercise, that can release dopamine and activate this drive system. But it can also activate the soothing system as well when we release endorphins and we feel kind of a greater sense of well-being after exercising. But really today what I wanted to do was to focus on how we can nurture the soothing system. And so I want to share with you some practical ideas about ways that we can self-soothe. And then, as I said, I'll be introducing a couple of exercises. So some ways that we can bring our soothing system into action is to take some time for ourselves. Now, this might be really difficult at the moment. It might just be 2 minutes closed in the bathroom for a bit of peace and quiet. But even that is something. So finding little ways to get time for yourselves. Making time for things that you enjoy as well. So that might be watching an episode of your favourite show, spending time on hobbies, might be scheduling a video call with somebody, or making time to kind of cook a nice meal and eat it. Another way is lowering our expectations, as some of my colleagues have talked about earlier today. And for example, taking kind of soothing, deep breaths. There's some kind of sensory strategies that we can use as well, where we're really using our senses to bring our self-soothing system into to be activated. So that might be things like listening to some soothing music or having a nice soak in a hot bath. It might be giving ourselves a little mini facial, or just pausing and having a nice cup of tea, perhaps lighting a scented candle, or rubbing in, hand cream gently on ourselves, something like that, that uses our kind of sensory, these sensory strategies to help us to comfort ourselves. This one might sound a bit strange, but we can even use our physical touch. So what we know is that when we're touched by others, that helps to soothe us. Like the example with the baby at the beginning. But we can do that for ourselves. When we touch ourselves, we can get the same part of our brain to be activated and the soothing system activated. So, giving ourselves a hug, or, touching ourselves gently on our heart, or perhaps giving ourselves even a massage. If we notice that we tense, maybe in our neck we can massage, or massaging our feet. If you're in lockdown or kind of at home with other people, you might even want to get them involved as well. We can also just kind of pause and notice the sun on our face and use that kind of sensory, the sense of the warmth of the sun on us. So these are some ways that we can kind of self-comfort. Something else that we can do is use mindfulness. Now, often our threat system can become activated when we are worrying about things that might happen in the future. And so one way to help us with that is to be present in our experience right now in this moment. And that's what mindfulness is all about. It's about present moment awareness with a sense of compassion and without judgment. And there's some particular apps that you can use for this, things like Headspace and Insight Timer. And certainly Insight Timer has a number of free meditations that you can listen to in the comfort of your own home. But when I'm thinking about mindfulness, I'm not just thinking about the sort of formal meditation when we're, actually it's also a way of being that we can bring into our lives more generally. And so what I mean by this is just bringing this approach of being fully present in whatever we're doing without judgment, and bringing that mindful way of being to for example, listening to a piece of music, or to some of our everyday activities, our chores, or cleaning our teeth, for example, or just taking a pause to notice what we're experiencing, what we might call a mindful pause. And another way that we can activate our self-soothing system is to use our imagination. Now, our imagination can activate our threat system. Like I say, if we're worrying and imagining potential future scenarios, that can activate our threat. But so too, imagination can activate our soothing system. And so I invite you to join with me in a couple of exercises which use the power of our imagination, this power that we have as humans. I just invite you to have a go at these exercises with me. Now, be aware that often with imagery exercises, we might not get a really vivid picture. It might just be a fleeting image or a brief sense of something. And that's really okay. So here you can bring this approach of compassion and of lowering your expectations. And of course, if you feel uncomfortable at any point during the exercise, please do stop. Feel free to make a comment or send a message to the Polaris group. My colleagues are on hand to respond to any concerns. So the first one that I'm going to introduce is, both of them actually are exercises from this book that I mentioned. And the first one is imagining a safe place. And so I invite you just to have a go with me now. Just pause where you are. If you're comfortable to do so, close your eyes and just bring your attention to your breathing. Just breathing in and breathing out. And as you breathe out, just imagine breathing out tension in your body, any tension that might be there, breathing that out through your body so that it leaves your body out through your feet. So just breathing in and then breathing out again, releasing tension. And now I'd like you to focus on a place that gives you a feeling of safeness, of calmness, of peace, and of contentment. And really try to build this picture in your imagination as much as you can, using your senses. So what does this place look like? What can you see here? What can you hear? What can you smell? What's the ground beneath you like? What's the quality of the air like? So for example, you might picture a beach where you can feel the sand underneath your feet. You can hear the waves lapping and you can hear the breeze and feel the sunshine. Or you might picture something completely different, like being in a nice cozy lounge with a roaring log fire where you can hear the crackle of the wood burning and you can smell the wood smoke. And just really bring this image to mind as strongly as you're able to, trying as much as you can to build this with your senses. And now imagine that this place welcomes you, that this place really invites you in and you belong here. And you may find it helpful to give this place a name or a key word that you can associate with this place of safeness, of contentment, of calmness. Having a key word makes it easier to bring this to mind again in future. And so that's just one exercise first, the exercise of imagining a safe place. The next one that I would like to introduce to you is the idea of building an ideal compassionate image. And there is evidence that compassion imagery even boosts our immune system. So it gets our soothing system online, but also it can even boost our immune system. Now, there are 4 qualities that we're thinking about when we think about a compassionate image. We want this compassionate image to be wise enough to be aware that suffering can be part of human experience, that both good feelings and more unpleasant feelings are part of our experience. This image should also be full of warmth, great warmth and kindness, and full of strength, the strength to cope with challenge. And finally, this image should be non-judgmental, really non-judgmental and non-critical, just observing whatever experience is without judgment. And I'm just going to put these ideal compassionate image points up on the wall behind me as a little reminder there. And so again, I invite you to join with me in doing this exercise. Again, first, bring your attention to your breathing. And again, if you're comfortable to do so, close your eyes. Again, soothe yourself with your breathing, imagining tension leaving your body as you breathe out. Breathing in deeply and breathing out tension. And just bring a sort of half smile to your mouth as well if you can. Parting the lips and bringing a gentle smile to your face. Just as the part of our brain that's activated when we smile spontaneously, we can also activate when we bring a smile to our face consciously. So you're here, breathing with this half smile, breathing out tension from your body. And now start to bring to mind an ideal compassionate image. How would you like your ideal compassionate image to look? It doesn't have to be human. It could be an animal, or it could be just some other sort of image like a tree, or it may even just be a colour that you can associate with compassion. And how would you like your ideal compassionate image to sound? If it is human and it talks to you, what tone of voice does it use? And does this compassionate image have any other sensory qualities? And next, consider how you would like your ideal compassionate image to respond to you. Would you like this compassionate image, for example, to hug you or to hold you? Or would you like this compassionate image to stand in front of you and protect you, or to be an image of something over you that protects you? Would you like this image just to kind of say something reassuring or say something kind? Or perhaps this image leads you or guides you or teaches you skills that you have in your repertoire and reminds you of them. So just bring to mind how you would like your ideal compassionate image to respond to you. And then finally, consider how you would like to respond. Will you allow yourself to be held and to be comforted? And so that's another kind of imagery exercise that we can use to build a compassionate image. Another exercise that I'd like to introduce involves us writing. And writing can be a helpful way of us kind of getting feelings out onto paper and kind of processing our feelings a bit. And in this way, what I'm going to suggest is an exercise that's about using writing to write a compassionate letter to ourselves. And you might find it helpful to bring the compassionate image to mind. Imagine it writing this letter to you, or imagine it sitting alongside you whilst you write this letter to yourself. Sometimes people find it quite hard to write this kind of letter to themselves, and they may find it easier to write as if they're talking to someone else that they care deeply for. And the important thing with this letter is that it starts with understanding and acceptance for whatever you might be feeling, whatever your experience is, and whatever you might be thinking. So it shows understanding and acceptance for your circumstances as they are, without judgment. So for example, in this crisis, this kind of letter might start with a statement like, I know that this is a really hard time. I understand that you're anxious because of this threat. This makes sense because of this threat. And then the next step in this letter is to say something helpful or kind. So it might be just saying something reassuring or comforting. It might be reminding yourself how you have coped with these kinds of feelings before. It might be directing you to helpful strategies or techniques that you've used in the past, or directing you to things that you can do for yourself. Whatever it is, there's not really right and wrong with this. It's just about saying something that's kind and supportive. The only wrong is that please avoid saying something that you think you should or shouldn't do. Avoid saying how you should or you shouldn't be behaving, or you should or you shouldn't be thinking or feeling. It's important to be just really non-judgmental. So again, remembering these qualities of warmth and kindness, of wisdom and strength, and also of non-judgment. So today, what I've done here is given you a brief introduction to this approach, compassion-focused therapy. And I've used this approach to try to normalize our experiences at the moment in this time of crisis and this time of threat. I've discussed some practical ways that you might find it helpful to nurture and to activate your self-soothing system. These include kind of everyday activities that we can do to comfort us, using mindfulness. And then I've also introduced a couple of specific exercises using imagery and also writing a compassionate letter to ourselves. It's been a real pleasure to share these ideas with you, and I hope that there might be something helpful to you from this. If you have appreciated this video, or indeed any of the other videos from my colleagues throughout the day, and you're able to do so, please do consider making a donation to help us to continue to support you. Obviously, COVID-19 is affecting many, many businesses, and Polaris is no different. If you can and you're able to and you would like to, any donation amount is gratefully received. Look out next for the video from my colleague Karen, who's going to be thinking with us about ways that we can connect with ourselves at this time. And please do like our Facebook page, the Polaris Facebook page, where you will be able to find out about other things that we're running, other online seminars and videos and things that can help to support you through this time. If you're interested, I also have a Facebook page. It's Dr. Chadwick Clinical Psychology. And please do make any comments on the video, or contact us at Polaris if you feel that you might benefit from a bit more support. As I said, it's been such a pleasure to share this therapeutic approach and to share these ideas with you. And I really hope that there may be something that you can take away from this to help you personally to self-soothe in this time of crisis. Thank you very much.